He was just trying to attend a business meeting on the 15th floor when the security guard decided he didn't belong in the upscale office building. What started as a routine meeting quickly turned into the security guard's worst nightmare, because the man he just kicked out wasn't just any businessman, he was someone with the power to shut down entire operations with a single phone call. And when he calmly reached into his jacket and flashed his FBI badge, the guard's face went pale as he realized he had just discriminated against the wrong federal agent. The Millennium Tower stood 42 stories tall in the heart of downtown Chicago, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun across Michigan Avenue. As one of the city's most prestigious office buildings, it housed law firms, investment companies, and corporate headquarters that generated billions in revenue. The lobby was a testament to luxury and exclusivity: marble floors imported from Italy, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes, and security protocols that were supposed to ensure only the right kind of people gained access to the upper floors. Special Agent Marcus Thompson approached the building's main entrance at exactly 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his scheduled meeting with the partners at Morrison & Associates, one of Chicago's most influential law firms. At 38, Marcus had spent the last 15 years building a reputation as one of the FBI's most effective civil rights investigators. His record was spotless, his conviction rate was impressive, and his dedication to justice was unquestioned by everyone who worked with him. Marcus was dressed in his standard business attire, a charcoal gray suit tailored to fit his athletic build, a crisp white shirt, and a conservative navy tie. His appearance was professional, authoritative, and entirely appropriate for a meeting with high-powered attorneys. In his briefcase, he carried files related to a federal investigation into housing discrimination that had the potential to result in millions of dollars in fines and significant jail time for the perpetrators. As Marcus entered the Millennium Tower's expansive lobby, he noticed the usual morning bustle of business professionals heading to their offices, visitors checking in for meetings, and maintenance staff ensuring everything operated smoothly. The lobby's atmosphere was designed to impress. Soft, classical music played from hidden speakers. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and fresh flowers, and every surface gleamed with meticulous care. Marcus approached the security desk, where visitors were required to check in before accessing the elevators. Behind the marble-topped counter sat two security guards in navy blue uniform. The first was an older white man with graying hair and the bearing of someone who took his authority seriously. His nameplate read R. Patterson, and he had worked building security for over 20 years. The second guard was younger, perhaps in his 30s, with short-cropped brown hair and the kind of suspicious expression that suggested he viewed every visitor as a potential threat. As Marcus waited his turn in line, he noticed Patterson's eyes tracking his movement with unusual interest. There was something in the guard's expression that Marcus recognized from his years in law enforcement, the look of someone who had already made assumptions and was looking for reasons to justify them. When Marcus reached the security desk, Patterson looked up with the expression that was more an interrogation than customer service. "Can I help you?" Patterson asked, his tone suggesting that help was the last thing he intended to provide. "Good morning," Marcus replied professionally. "I have a 10 a.m. meeting with Morrison & Associates on the 15th floor. My name is Marcus Thompson." Patterson's eyes narrowed as he looked Marcus up and down, taking in his expensive suit, professional demeanor, and confident bearing. Instead of checking the visitor log or calling upstairs to confirm the appointment, Patterson leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Morrison & Associates," Patterson repeated slowly. "And what kind of meeting would that be?" Marcus maintained his professional composure, though he recognized the tactic. "It's a business meeting regarding a federal investigation. They're expecting me." "Federal investigation," Patterson said with a smirk. "Right. And you're what, some kind of investigator?" "I'm with the FBI," Marcus said simply, though he didn't elaborate further. In his experience, providing too much information too quickly often led to unnecessary complications. Patterson's smirk widened. "FBI, huh? You got some ID to prove that?" This was where things began to feel wrong. In 15 years of visiting office buildings, law firms, and corporate headquarters, Marcus had never been asked to provide federal identification before being allowed to visit a scheduled appointment. Building security typically checked visitor logs, made phone calls to confirm meetings, and issued temporary access badges. They didn't demand to see federal credentials. "I'm here for a scheduled business meeting," Marcus said, his voice remaining calm but firm. "If you'd like to call Morrison and Associates to confirm my appointment, I'm happy to wait." Patterson didn't reach for the phone. Instead, he stood up, his posture becoming more aggressive. "Here's the thing, friend. This is a high-security building. We don't just let anyone walk in here claiming to be federal agents." The younger guard, whose nameplate read J. Mitchell, had been listening to the exchange with growing interest. He stood up as well, positioning himself slightly to Marcus's right in what Marcus recognized as a flanking maneuver. "Maybe you should try a different building," Mitchell suggested. "This one might be out of your price range." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with recognition. He had investigated enough discrimination cases to know exactly what was happening. These guards had looked at him, a black man in an expensive suit, and decided he didn't belong in their exclusive building. They weren't checking his credentials or verifying his appointment because they had already determined he was lying. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when questioning suspects. "I have a confirmed appointment with Morrison and Associates. I'm asking you to follow standard security protocol and verify my meeting." Patterson laughed, actually laughed. "Standard protocol? You think you can just walk in here with some story about being FBI and we're supposed to roll out the red carpet?" "I think you're supposed to do your job," Marcus replied evenly. That's when Mitchell made his first mistake. He stepped closer to Marcus, invading his personal space in a clear attempt at intimidation. "Maybe you didn't hear my partner. This building is for business professionals, not for people looking to cause trouble." Marcus remained perfectly still, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening, but his mind was cataloging everything. The guards' names, their badge numbers, their exact words, and the presence of security cameras that would have recorded the entire encounter. "I'm not looking to cause trouble," Marcus said quietly. "I'm trying to attend a business." Patterson came around the security desk, now clearly treating Marcus as some kind of threat rather than a legitimate visitor. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and leave this building. If you come back, we'll call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." "Arrested for trespassing?" Marcus repeated. "For trying to attend a scheduled business meeting. For trying to run some kind of scam," Mitchell added. "We see your type all the time. Dress up in a suit, claim to be something you're not, try to get access to places you don't belong." The phrase "your type" hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus had heard those words countless times in his investigations, usually from defendants who were trying to explain away their discriminatory behavior without explicitly mentioning race. "And what type would that be?" Marcus asked. Patterson and Mitchell exchanged a look. They were smart enough not to answer that question directly, but their meaning was clear to everyone in the lobby who was paying attention, and several people were now watching the confrontation with obvious interest. "The type that doesn't belong in buildings like this," Patterson said finally. That's when Marcus made his decision. He had given these guards multiple opportunities to follow proper protocol, to check his appointment, to treat him with the basic respect accorded to any legitimate visitor. Instead, they had chosen to escalate the situation based solely on his race. It was time to show them exactly who they were dealing with. "Actually," Marcus said, reaching slowly into his jacket, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Both guards tensed, their hands moving toward their equipment belts. "Keep your hands where we can see them," Patterson barked. Marcus moved deliberately, making sure his actions were visible to the security camera. He withdrew his federal credentials, a leather wallet containing his FBI badge and identification card. "Special Agent Marcus Thompson," he said calmly, displaying his badge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division." The change in the lobby atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Patterson's face went from flushed with authority to pale with realization. Mitchell actually took a step backward, his eyes wide with shock. Several other people in the lobby had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation, and now they were witnessing something they had never expected to see. "Now," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority. "I'm going to ask you one more time to verify my appointment with Morrison and Associates, and then we're going to have a conversation about your building security protocols." But the real shock was still coming, because Marcus Thompson wasn't just any FBI agent. He was the lead investigator on a federal task force that specialized in discrimination in places of public accommodation, and Millennium Tower was already on his radar. What Patterson and Mitchell didn't know was that Marcus had been investigating complaints about their building for the past 3 months. The FBI had received 17 separate reports of racial profiling at Millennium Tower, all following the same pattern: black visitors being subjected to excessive questioning, arbitrary security measures, and outright denial of access, despite having legitimate business in the building. The irony was devastating. In their attempt to keep Marcus out of the building, Patterson and Mitchell had just provided him with the perfect first-hand evidence of the discrimination he was already investigating. They had essentially prosecuted themselves. Marcus pulled out a small digital recorder that he always carried during investigations. "Gentlemen, I need to inform you that this conversation is now part of an ongoing federal investigation. You have the right to remain silent, though anything you say can and will be used as evidence in federal court." Patterson's hands began to shake. "Federal court? Agent Thompson, surely we can work this out. This was just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Marcus repeated, his voice taking on the clinical tone he used when building cases. "Let me make sure I understand your position. You're telling me that your standard security protocol includes refusing to verify appointments, threatening visitors with arrest, and telling people they don't belong here based on their appearance." Mitchell stepped forward desperately. "Sir, we were just being cautious. In a building like this, we have to be careful about who we let in." "Careful about who you let in," Marcus nodded slowly. "And what criteria do you use to determine who requires this extra level of caution?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Both guards knew that any honest answer would be an admission of racial profiling, but remaining silent was equally damning. We look for suspicious behavior," Patterson said finally. "Suspicious behavior," Marcus repeated, making note. "And what specific suspicious behavior did you observe in my case?" Silence. "Was it suspicious that I approached your desk professionally? Was it suspicious that I stated my business clearly? Or was it suspicious that I'm a black man in an expensive suit?" "We never said anything about race," Mitchell protested. Marcus smiled. "Actually, you said quite a lot about race. You mentioned my type, suggested I was in the wrong building, and implied I was running some kind of scam. In federal civil rights law we call that discriminatory intent, and it's a prosecutable offense." Patterson stared at the badge as if it might disappear if he looked away. "Agent Thompson, there must have been some kind of misunderstanding." "Oh, there's been a misunderstanding, all right," Marcus replied, returning his credentials to his jacket. "The misunderstanding is that you think federal agents can be discriminated against without consequences." Mitchell had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Sir, we were just following security protocols. We have to be careful about—" "Security protocols," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. "Your security protocol is to refuse to verify appointments for black visitors. Your security protocol is to tell people they don't belong here based on their race." "We never said anything about race," Patterson protested weakly. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "Agent Patterson, I've been investigating civil rights violations for 15. I know exactly what you said, how you said it, and why you said it. And fortunately for the federal case I'm about to build, everything we've discussed has been recorded by your own security cameras." The color completely drained from Patterson's face. "Federal civil rights violation under federal law," Marcus explained, pulling out his phone. "Discrimination in public accommodation based on race. It's a federal crime with serious penalties." As Marcus began making calls, word of the incident spread quickly through the building. Morrison and Associates had been expecting Agent Thompson, and were horrified to learn that their building's security had attempted to prevent him from reaching his appointment. The law firm's managing partner, James Morrison, personally came down to the lobby to apologize and escort Marcus to their offices. But the incident was far from over. Within 2 hours, FBI investigators arrived at Millennium Tower to interview witnesses and review security footage. Within 6 hours, the building management company had terminated both Patterson and Mitchell. Within 24 hours, the story was trending on social media under the hashtag "the security footage," which the building management was legally required to preserve, showed the entire encounter in devastating detail. Patterson and Mitchell's discriminatory behavior was captured from multiple angles. Their words were clearly audible, and their refusal to follow standard security protocols was undeniable. Marcus's investigation into Millennium Tower revealed a pattern of discrimination that went far beyond two rogue security guards. Over the past 5 years, the building had received dozens of complaints from black visitors who reported being subjected to unusual scrutiny, excessive questioning, and arbitrary restrictions that were not applied to white visitors. The security camera footage from previous incidents painted a disturbing picture. The FBI's digital forensics team recovered hundreds of hours of lobby surveillance that showed a clear pattern of differential treatment. White visitors were routinely waved through security with minimal interaction, while black visitors were consistently subjected to extended questioning. Even more damning were the internal communications discovered during the investigation. Text messages between Patterson and Mitchell revealed racist commentary about building visitors. Another one trying to get upstairs, Mitchell had texted about a black attorney, told him to try the service entrance. Patterson had responded with laughing emoji. The building's visitor logs showed systematic exclusions that followed racial lines. Over a 2-year period, 17 black visitors had been denied access to scheduled appointments, while 0 white visitors had been turned away under similar circumstances. The federal investigation expanded to include the building management company, which owned 17 similar properties across the Midwest. Internal emails revealed that building managers had been instructed to maintain appropriate tenant demographics and ensure that the buildings attracted the right clientele. 6 months later, the Department of Justice announced a settlement with Millennium Properties that included $3.2 million in damages to affected individuals, mandatory civil rights training for all employees, and federal monitoring of their facilities for 3 years. The settlement also required Millennium Properties to implement a comprehensive anti-discrimination program that included regular testing by undercover federal agents, quarterly reports to the Justice Department, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. The building's management company faced additional consequences beyond the federal settlement. 17 major tenants, including Morrison and Associates, terminated their leases in protest of the discriminatory practices. The resulting loss of rental income exceeded $12 million annually and forced the company into bankruptcy proceedings. Patterson and Mitchell found themselves unemployable in the security industry. Their discriminatory behavior had been documented in federal court filings. Their names were associated with a major civil rights violation, and no reputable security company would hire them. But perhaps the most significant outcome was the change in how discrimination was perceived and prosecuted in places of public accommodation. Marcus's case became a landmark example of how civil rights violations could be effectively documented and prosecuted, leading to stronger enforcement and greater awareness. Morrison and Associates, the law firm that Marcus had been trying to visit, issued a public statement condemning discrimination and announcing a pro bono program to represent victims of civil rights violations. They also terminated their lease at Millennium Tower and moved their offices to a building with a demonstrated commitment to equality. Marcus Thompson received commendations from the Department of Justice and the FBI for his professional handling of the incident and his subsequent investigation. But for him, the most meaningful recognition came from the dozens of other discrimination victims who found the courage to come forward after seeing that justice was possible. The FBI's Civil Rights Division created the Thompson Protocol, a new standard for investigating discrimination in places of public accommodation that was implemented nationwide. The protocol emphasized the importance of thorough documentation, systematic evidence collection, and the use of statistical analysis, and prove patterns of discrimination. Marcus was promoted to senior special agent and assigned to lead the FBI's new systematic discrimination task force, which investigated coordinated efforts to exclude minorities from public accommodations across multiple jurisdictions. His first major case under the new assignment involved a chain of luxury hotels that had been systematically overcharging black guests and claiming that premium rooms were unavailable when they clearly were not. The techniques Marcus developed during the Millennium Tower investigation became standard training for federal agents investigating civil rights violations. His methodical approach to documenting discriminatory statements, collecting statistical evidence, and building systematic cases was taught at the FBI Academy and adopted by Justice Department prosecutors nationwide. But beyond the professional recognition, Marcus had gained something more valuable: a deeper understanding of the victims he served and a renewed commitment to ensuring that no one should have to endure the humiliation and injustice he had experienced. His personal encounter with discrimination had made him not just a more effective investigator, but a more empathetic advocate for civil rights. 3 months after the incident, Marcus received a letter from a young black professional who had been denied access to a different building in downtown Chicago. "I saw what happened to you," the letter read, "and I realized I didn't have to accept discrimination. I filed a complaint, and they're now facing federal charges. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to be silent." The Millennium Tower incident became required reading in FBI training programs, not just as an example of how to handle discrimination, but as a reminder that federal agents themselves are not immune to the biases they investigate. Marcus continued his work in civil rights enforcement, but the incident had given him a new perspective on the victims he served. He had always understood discrimination intellectually, but experiencing it personally had deepened his commitment to justice and his empathy for those who faced bias every day. The building that had once symbolized exclusivity and discrimination became a symbol of accountability and change. New management implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, hired diverse security staff, and established relationships with civil rights organizations to ensure that everyone felt welcome. Patterson and Mitchell eventually found work in other fields, but the lesson of their encounter with Marcus Thompson followed them. They had learned, in the most expensive way possible, that discrimination always comes with consequences, especially when you target someone who has dedicated their life to fighting it. And Marcus Thompson, he continued showing up to business meetings, federal investigations, and civil rights enforcement action. But now, every security guard, every receptionist, and every gatekeeper in Chicago knew that the professional black man in the expensive suit might just be the federal agent who could end their career with a single badge flash. The message was clear: discrimination is not just morally wrong, it's federally illegal, and there are people whose job it is to make sure that everyone, regardless of race, gets the respect and access they deserve. Sometimes justice comes through the court, sometimes it comes through legislation, but sometimes justice comes in the form of a federal badge that reminds everyone that civil rights are not suggestions, they are laws, and those laws will be enforced. This story reminds us that discrimination still exists, but so do people with the authority to stop it. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice and accountability. Hit the notification bell and let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed discrimination, and what did you do about it?